Hey everybody, JC here with another T&I toy review. And for today's review, we're going to take a look at the new DC Collectibles 7-inch DC Comics Designer Series Greg Capullo Catwoman figure. This is the 6th figure to be released in this series, and like with all the other figures in this line, it comes packaged in a standardized window box packaging. The colors of the box are white, and for this particular figure, purple. You've got the figure clearly displayed in the window box and the Catwoman name off to the side, and then down below you have the DC Comics Designer Series logo with Greg Capullo's name. On the one side of the packaging you have some artwork from Greg Capullo showing Catwoman, and then on the back of the packaging we have a look at the 4 figures released in the second series of this line. Red Hood, Catwoman, Mr. Freeze, all of which are out now, and then Thrasher Suit Batman, which should start hitting shelves next Wednesday. And then it also tells us that this figure was sculpted by Jonathan Matthews. Okay, so let's get this figure open and take a look at what's inside. Okay, so here's a look at the figure outside of the packaging. Now this version of Catwoman basically depicts her in her new 52 costume. Very similar to what we saw with the previously released figure from DC Collectibles that came in a box set, only that version was based on Jim Lee's art as opposed to Greg Capullo's. But the overall costume design is very similar. It's an all-black costume. She's got a zipper on the front. For this particular incarnation, the zipper is pulled all the way up to her neck. So in other words, no cleavage is showing, unlike on the Jim Lee figure. She also has some buckles on her boots, and the boots themselves are high heels as opposed to flat boots like you saw on the Jim Lee figure. Now also the costume, to me at least, on this figure looks more like spandex as opposed to on the Jim Lee figure. It kind of looked more like leather. I think technically they're both supposed to be spandex, but just figure wise, the costume on the Jim Lee version definitely kind of has more of a leather look to me than this version, which looks much more like spandex. The biggest thing I don't like about this figure is with the head sculpt. I don't like how they've done the goggles on this figure. They've used a solid gold metallic paint on the eyes, so you can't really see her eyes at all, and it almost gives her kind of this bugged look to me. I think it would have been better if they'd used like a translucent plastic with a yellow tint to it, basically, which is how it's depicted in the comic books. And then also the other thing to note on her head, or on her face, is seems to be some weird thing going on with her nose. It's very red at the bottom of her nose. It's almost like she had a cold and has been blowing her nose a lot. I don't know if that's a paint error or it's supposed to be like that. The only reason why I don't think it's just a paint error is because I did notice that you see that same kind of reddish tone on the bottom of her nose in the PR pictures on the packaging. And usually you don't see paint errors like that on a PR picture. So, you know, I don't know why they would do it deliberately, but you know, it seems to be something all across the board, not just a paint error with this particular figure. But either way, it looks kind of off to me. Otherwise, the head sculpt's pretty nice. The goggles have a silver metallic trim for the around for the rims of the goggles, and then she's got basically a gray strap painted on her head that kind of goes all the way around. And there's some black shadowing on the back of the strap, and then the ears are sculpted. The cat ears are sculpted on the mask. So the figure comes with one accessory, her whip. And for this particular version of the whip, they've used an elastic type material, so you can kind of pull it and stretch it. Unlike the whip that came with the Jim Lee version, which was a harder plastic and tends to stay rolled up more. I like this whip a little bit better with this material. And there's some nice sculpting on the handle, and then it's got a little loop on the end of it as well. It's thicker on the handle end, obviously, than on the whip end, and then the whip end, it splits into 2 parts like you see in the comic books. And she holds the whip in her right hand, and basically the best way to get her to hold it is you kind of start on the thin end of the whip and you kind of string it through her fingers until you get to the handle, and then you kind of just pull the handle through, and she grips it pretty good once you get the handle into her hand. She grips it pretty nice and tight. So the figure stands at just a little bit over 6.5 inches tall, not quite 7 inches, but she's definitely a bit on the tall side. You know, with those high heels, you know, that makes her pretty tall. She's definitely taller than the Jim Lee Catwoman figure, which did not have the high heels. And she's about the same height as the Greg Capullo Batman figure from the first wave. Now, I don't know if in the comics, you know, if they're about the same height or not, so I can't really speak to how accurate the scale is on the figure. But, you know, for the most part, they're basically, the Batman figure and Catwoman are about the same height. So articulation on this figure to me is a little disappointing. Really no real improvements over what we saw on the Jim Lee Catwoman figure, unfortunately. Basically, the really only difference is this figure has thigh swivels, but does not have the bicep swivels like the Jim Lee Catwoman. But otherwise, they pretty much have the same kind of articulation. Which, you know, after looking at that Mr. Freeze figure or the Batman figure from this line, it's a little disappointing that they couldn't give her a little bit more articulation. Because that's really the thing I don't like about either figure, is their lack of posability. But anyway, the head is on a standard ball joint, so she can look left and right. She has a little bit of up movement, but not much in the way of down movement. Arms are on a standard ball hinge joint, so she can get her arms all the way out, and she's got good rotation there. As I mentioned, there's no bicep swivel on this figure, and she's got a single hinged elbow, so she can bend her elbow about that much. There is a swivel at the glove cuff, but no actual wrist articulation on this figure. No midsection articulation at all. And then the legs are on those kind of T-crotch design, so you can't even do the splits on this figure. She can't get her leg forward about that much, and then back fine. She does have a thigh swivel. Single hinged knee, so she can bend her knee about that much. And then there's a swivel at the boot cuff, but no ankle articulation at all on this figure. And then she has one peg hole in the bottom of her foot. Okay, so that's my review. Overall, this isn't a terrible figure by any means, but, you know, especially if you already have that Jim Lee version, I don't really see much point in getting this one. Costume design, they're very similar, and, you know, there's no real addition as far as articulation goes, which is a little disappointing. I also don't really like how the goggles look on this figure. Now, one thing I also want to note, I'm not sure I mentioned earlier, is the goggles are not removable on this figure, unlike the Jim Lee version that did have the removable goggles. So, you know, maybe if you didn't pick up that Jim Lee version, you know, you didn't want to buy the box set to get that one Catwoman figure, then this might be a good fill-in. Or if you're just a huge Greg Capullo fan, then you probably would want to add this one to your collection. But otherwise, I'd say this one's probably a pass. Either way, though, this figure is hitting comic and specialty shops now. So if you want to add her to your collection, start checking your local stores. And I'd really like to hear what you think about the figure. You know, so leave a comment in the comment section. Let us know what you think. If you're so inclined, please like the video. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. And until next time, I'll catch you later.